All right, so here we are. This is another episode of the Uncivilized Art Podcast. I'm your host, Birmingham Hazan, but I go by Bandit Haze in the online space. And today, my guest is Mr. Oh, actually, let me put some respect on your name, DJ KoopaNut. Let me get the title right, DJ KoopaNut. How you
You
doing
don't need to
today,
say
sir?
DJ. I don't use the term DJ. It's something that everyone, once you become a DJ, whatever you've done before, whatever your name is, they will put DJ at the front of it. I'm like, Fatboy Slim isn't known as DJ Fatboy Slim. So, you don't need to put that there.
We don't
But
need
I
to.
do
Okay.
do DJing, but I don't want to be pigeonholed into just being a DJ. Nothing against people who are just DJs, but I know that I do I kind of promote myself doing other stuff too.
Okay, well, cool. Well, speaking of that, then let's do a little bit of intro. So, for those who might not know, who is you? What do you do? Who?
Uh,
What
I,
is you
uh,
about?
I'm KoopaNut. I am principally a DJ. I do a bit of chat as well. But I don't really consider myself as much. Well, I say much more as if it's a negative thing. But I'm essentially a streamer, and I do DJing out and about at the odd gig. But I stream a lot of DJ sets as well as streaming chat shows, and I do occasionally do a bit of gaming on stream as well. But that in itself is kind of a very minor. But I don't really market that as what I do.
Mm.
It's KoopaNut, DJ, and chat. And that's essentially what it is. I just like the sound of my own voice. I don't know if you gathered that or not.
Well, yeah, there's a few things I want to talk to you about when it comes to your voice in particular, actually. Before we get to that, though, so yeah, although gaming isn't a big part of your social media outputs, but you do like to play games in particular. I think you're big into retro games. I mean, I'll put retro games in the notes because that's what I thought you was into. But if you're into other games as well, I don't know, maybe you are.
Yeah, I'm kind of. I mean, I've got a huge retro collection. I uh, it's the nostalgic element of games. I'm sure if you've had anyone who plays retro games on the podcast before. In fact, I'm not sure if I haven't heard you talk about this kind of thing with some of your guests before. But there's something really visceral around playing games that you remember from your childhood
Mm.
or from your teenage years or from your 20s, and to me the machine itself and the controller are part of that memory.
Mm.
So I just don't get rid of consoles. I keep them all. I've still got my first ever. I think it needs repairing now actually, but I've still got my first ever Game Gear. I've got another Game Gear since.
Oh, the Game Gear.
I've got a NES, my original NES. Got my original Mega Drive in the cellar. It's not all set up. I'd love it all to be set up, and I'm
Uh,
so jealous of streamers and retro gamers who have those units where they're all backlit and they've got
yeah,
every
yeah.
controller set up there. But I just don't believe that those setups really truly work as well as they look. Like I've got a lot of retro games. I've tried to get them all set up before so that it's just a really easy process to just plug them in and play them. And it isn't. They all have different cables, power
Yeah.
units. They all have different inputs into the telly. It's so basically mine stay in the cellar until such time that I think, you know what, I really fancy playing EA hockey, and at that point I'll get my Mega Drive out for the weekend, plug it in, use it,
Mm.
and then chuck it back into the cellar. So it works like that really with my retro gaming. I did stream some retro games. I've got the ability to do it, but I found when I first started streaming games, which was the last thing I did when it came to streaming, I did DJing first, just chatting kind of second, and gaming third. Uh, I found it really hard, and actually, I didn't enjoy the gaming because I couldn't pay enough attention to the game. So I've
Mm.
realised now, this is nearly 2 years later, I suppose, since I first started streaming. You've just got to think really carefully about what games you stream, or at least I do, because I just don't have the capacity to kind of keep track of not often a busy chat, but on the occasions that it is, it will ruin the game, you know?
Hmm.
So I'm really selective over the games I play. But yeah, a very long answer to a very short question, which is yes, I like retro games.
That's all good. But yeah, I think I mean, I imagine a lot of streamers kind of have that thing as well, and certainly when I do streams, that's kind of the thing where you're playing a game, and especially if you're playing a game that you're not that familiar with, and you're trying to kind of pay attention to it enough to get some kind of enjoyment out of it, or at least understand it enough to form an opinion on it. But then the chat's going, and so you kind of split your attention, and you're missing bits here, or you're missing bits in the chat. Versus, I guess, a game that you're a bit more familiar with, it's less of an issue because you can kind of look at the chat. It doesn't matter so much if you miss a little bit of the game because you'll kind of already know anyway. So yeah, I think I mean, that's not that I don't stream games that I've never played before, but yeah, I think it would definitely give some thoughts as to which games I stream and how much attention I need to
Yeah, I mean,
to
for me,
give
it's
it.
like it's things like the format of the game. So I played my first like RPG only about 4 or 5 years ago because I didn't like as a kid. I wanted action. I wasn't fussed about walking around looking for a pot to give to an old man who might exchange it for a key. Like that to me as a kid, that sounds so boring. But now I'm old. I love all that. So that's the main thing that I tend to stream. If I stream anything, it will be an RPG, particularly like a turn-based RPG, because then, I mean, I'm currently 4 years into Dragon Quest 11 because I'm rubbish at it. But that is a turn-based JRPG. The dialogue's hilarious, so I can take the mickey out of it on stream. But it's really well done. It's not a bad game. There's just a way you can perceive it as being quite funny. The plot lines are crazy as well. And that has been my favorite thing to stream. And in some streams I've done, I'll set some instrumental beats up and then I'll freestyle about what I'm playing and what's happening in the game. But that takes a lot of effort. I finish a stream having done that, and I'll be absolutely shattered. So I tend to just do gaming streams, and I have points, channel points redeems that you can do. So if someone redeems a freestyle rap while I'm doing a game stream, I will then honor it. But I don't do streams dedicated to that anymore because it was so tiring.
Yeah, I do want to talk to you about your freestyling. Before I get to that, though, you mentioned the Game Gear earlier, and I think we need to give a little love to the Game Gear
Oh
because
yeah,
back in the day, it was like game. I think yeah, the Game Boy came out first. I think the Game
oh
Gear
yeah,
came out maybe a year or so later, and it was on every level a better console. It was color. It had
yeah,
better graphics
yeah.
and everything, but for some reason,
You could play it in the dark, which you couldn't do with the Game Boy.
right, that had it also had different attachments you can get as well. Like there was a TV attachment, I think a radio one as
Yeah,
well, and different
yeah,
things you can do with it. So I had all these cool things, but even still, it lost out in terms of sales and popularity to the Game Boy. But and one of the biggest things, the biggest drawbacks of the Game Gear, of course, was the battery. Like it took like six batteries, I think it was six AA batteries, like three on one side, three on the other side, and they would last maybe like 20 minutes if you're lucky. Yeah.
I never put batteries in my Game Gear. I wasn't allowed them.
So you
I
just
had to
plugged it
play
in.
it plugged into the
Yeah,
mains.
right.
So, which was actually, it wasn't an intentional thing from my parents, but it meant that I I didn't always have something to distract me. I had to deal with the real world when I'm sat in the back of the car driving to my grandparents for 2 hours. Like I think there's benefits to not having the full convenience that you have with things now. I mean, I
Yeah.
know things change. It makes me immediately sound like an old man, and I'm hopeful that throughout the rest of the podcast I can redeem myself from that. But times change or
Bro, we
whatever.
are old, man. It's so good.
But yeah, I mean, it was always we get to my grandparents, and after when it got to the point that my dad wanted to watch the Grand Prix, I'd shuffle over and sit on a cushion in the corner next to the power socket and play my Game Gear,
Yeah.
for hours on end. Like it was amazing. Such a great console.
Yeah.
It's I think its legacy for me, I didn't, because at that age also you don't really know about sales figures or anything like that, particularly back then. I didn't know it was a failure. I just knew I had one, and I
Right.
absolutely loved it, you know. And we used to go to Blockbuster Video every other weekend, and I'd rent a different game for the weekend. It was wicked, and yeah, I didn't want to get rid of it, so I've still got it. I've got another one as well. Since both of them need some soldering work, which I can easily sort out now. I just haven't got around to doing. I keep meaning to do it. Problem is now that retro gaming you can do on pretty much any other console you've got. So it's having the consoles is lovely, but it's completely unnecessary. So I just don't want to let go of those little things. But
I mean,
yeah, it's not necessary. Nearly every game that was out then you can get. Although that being said, on the Game Gear, they were usually Master System ports. So like Sonic is the Master System version of Sonic, not the Mega Drive version of Sonic. Although the Mega Drive version of Sonic was obviously released at the point that came out, because they released the Sonic on the Mega Drive first, and then they retroactively made one for the Master System and the Game Gear after. That were obviously very completely different games, all still actually pretty good. But yeah, the Game Gear. I ended up with a Game Boy after. I think I've always liked portable consoles. It's a big thing. Like I say it in quite a few of my streams when people talk, we get onto gaming, which is inevitable. If I had to get rid of all my consoles and I could only keep one, I'd keep the Switch. It's the best thing ever. It's just incredible. So, and because you've got the best of both worlds, because you stick it in the dock and it's on the telly, and it's brilliant.
Yeah, no, the Switch is pretty cool, and I do feel like with the Game Gear though, like you plug it into wall, that's pretty much how you had to play it. Because like I said, the battery was really bad, and I mean it did have some cool games that like one of my favorite games was Castle of Illusions, Mickey Mouse on the Game Gear.
Yeah, I remember
Which
that.
may or may not have been a port. I don't know, but it was a cool. I played on the Game Gear, and it was a cool thing. But yeah, I think when it comes to playing retro games now, and how closely do you want to get to playing it the way it was intended, I think it's gonna be a big factor. Because yeah, you could get them on Xbox or the Nintendo online store, or if you really want, you can go the emulator route and could get a controller and play it that way, and yeah, you will still play the game and play it. You experience the game, the story, the action, everything else, but the controller's going to be different. That square, or so that rectangle controller for the NES that the NES had, that hurt the edges, the edges where it hurt your hands. You don't get that experience, or that thick Game Gear that especially when you're a child and you're holding this thing and you're trying to hit all the buttons on it. You don't get that experience, and that's a part of it. So although yeah, it's like movies. For example, you can watch an old movie on DVD, right? Or Blu-ray or whatever, and it's like cool, you can see the movie, but ultimately that's not really how that movie was intended, especially when you look at silent movies, when they were made at a time that you had like a person playing the piano in a cinema,
Yeah.
and yeah, they put the music on it, but it's just not quite the same. So you could
It's not the same. I think
experience something, but not in that original way, or as close to the original way as you can.
it's great that you have both, and I think I'm fortunate that I have got a cellar full of all these old consoles and then there's certain games that aren't available on other things. I'll get my PS3 out so that I can play DJ Hero, because they haven't made a new version of that. I mean, I suck at it. Luckily, it's actually easier to be an actual DJ than it is to be good at DJ Hero, I think, anyway. So yeah, there were quite a few consoles I kept, but I've got a big collection, but it was never for the money. And as such, because quite often I kind of bought big job lots off of mates who didn't want their stuff anymore, or when they're doing loft clear outs or whatever, I'll offer them 70 quid for whatever it is,
Mm.
end up with stuff that I don't want. I had the scope for the SNES
Oh yeah.
boxed and the game with it. I was like, I'm never going to sit and play that. So I sold that. That being said, I then regretted not having a light gun and bought a PS1 and Saturn light gun. And then I didn't have a telly that was compatible.
Yeah.
So
So you
2
need
years
the
ago,
CRT monitors.
I bought this massive CRT telly for
Mm.
99p from down the road in great nick. I had it in the office for maybe 2 weeks. I was like, I haven't got enough space to live my life, so that's been in the cellar ever since. So it's I think what I'm hoping is that further down the line we'll have a bit more space and I can have a permanent setup of a console and that can rotate.
Mm.
Whereas at the moment, like the current consoles are set up, the Series X, the Switch, and the PS4 is downstairs. I use all of those regularly, but none of the retro stuff sees the light of day. It's a shame.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, we had a tradition with the N64 for a while where, sort of every Christmas pretty much every Christmas we'll play Mario Kart on the N64. So we were super competitive with that game back in the day. So it became this thing that every Christmas we'll play that game and see who's still got the skills, right? But yeah, eventually that console just packed up, but it stopped working.
I think I've still got a couple of N64s, and that Christmas N64 thing, I think, is a thing for everyone. I think there's lots of groups of mainly blokes generally, and I'm guessing that's just because that was generally the demographic that was playing it at the time.
Yeah.
But all through our 20s and 30s, there's quite a few groups of mates that around Christmas get together and break the N64 out for, I think a friend of Bernard James, who's my label mate and bandmate, he had a friend who every Christmas Eve, him and his mate would sit and complete Mario 64 from start to finish on Christmas Eve. And me and my mates would always have a GoldenEye night in and around Christmas. I don't know what it is about that console because the people don't do it. I guess it's because it was the first four controller console all in the front. Because all the others you needed a
dock or something.
You? Nobody bought them. Like only the rich kid who was a complete tosser that you didn't want to hang out. The person who was desperate for friends bought one, but no one wanted to go there and play it. But when the N64 out, everyone had the opportunity to play 4-player all at the same time, and that's when the GoldenEye nights and the Mario Kart nights with the with the pizzas and popcorn and that whole kind of blockbuster night kind of vibe kind of came from, I think. And I reckon that's why it's in the zeitgeist of people of our generation around that Christmas time. It's that everyone's free, they've got spare time. Let's play Mario Kart together.
Yeah, I didn't know it was a thing. I just thought it was something that we did.
Yeah, I think it's a thing.
I've honestly never heard of anyone else doing it. I mean, I would imagine people have those sort of traditions, but yeah, I didn't know N64 specifically was a thing. But that's pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool. But yeah, like Mario Kart, GoldenEye, yeah, that was another one that we played. We're quite competitive with. But I think Mario Kart, at least for me anyway, that was probably the one that I was most competitive with, especially with the time trials and try and get as fast as times as possible. And at one time, I had the fastest time in my family on every single track on time trials. I think maybe every single track, possibly except for one. It was a while ago, I can't remember. But definitely most, if not all the tracks, I had the fastest time. And it was like that for the longest until my little brother one day decided to get it out and just dedicate a whole day to beating some of the scores. And by that time, I'm so out of practice of it. It's like, oh, man. But yeah.
Yeah, the N64, I think, is such an iconic console for me, and I think for a lot of people. For me, it was the one that I introduced my nephews to when they were younger, and now the youngest of those two, he now streams on Twitch, and he streams speed runs of Mario 64.
Oh,
which
awesome.
I was the one who played it with him first when he was 4. He's now 18. So it's
Uh,
really that I find really weird. Also, he's significantly better at it than I ever was. Although when they do speed runs, they he was like, oh, I don't play the version you used to play. I have to play the Japanese version because the Japanese versions are what they do all the speed runs on because it runs at a faster frame rate or something, and there's
okay.
certain glitches in there that allow you to so the glitches are kind of encouraged as part. So basically, it's like he makes money off of teaching people how to speed run Mario 64. He's made quite a fair bit off on Fiverr of like
Okay.
running. It's crazy. So
You
if
know,
you told me that
it's
that was a way of making money in 1998 when I first played it or whatever, like it's
you
ridiculous.
know what the it's I mean it's a cool thing, but it is pretty crazy for me to hear these things because it's like when I mean you say he's 18, so yeah, when I was that age, like say like teenage years, like you're in school, and it's all about like study hard, get good grades, go to college, go to uni, get some job and work hard and that kind of thing. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that, and people still do that, but just to feel like all these years later, who would have anticipated that you can make money by telling people how to play a game fast? Like who'd
It's
anticipated that?
it's
Yeah.
absolutely crazy. And yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. That
Hmm.
whole work ethic thing, and I think the younger people now. I think it's really good that they're not kind of thrown into this kind of tunnel of like this is how your life's going to be.
Mm.
You get on here and you end here, and then you just work in the middle. Like I never wanted my life to be like that,
Yeah.
um, which is why my 20s was spent trying all the different things that I tried. And I think it's really good that there are people, and I think that the problem is that you've got so many like articles talking about the new generations and how they're not, they'll apply for a job and they'll say, tell me this or this because I'll know whether it's worth my time applying. And then they're like, how entitled are they? It's like, well, it's not about being entitled. It's
Mm.
about prioritizing your time in
Exactly. Yeah.
life. You only live once. Like, if they are going to hate the job, why should they waste their time applying for it?
Yeah.
If you're going to be a complete prick to them as their boss and dictate every minute of their bloody lives and not allow them to enjoy their lives, what they don't owe you anything either. So I think there is always that question in a job interview is like what's in it for me.
Right.
Why wouldn't you ask it first? Like, stop wasting your time in where they're like, oh, we won't accept a CV. You've got to fill out our application process and all that. It's going out the window, and actually it's good because at some point employers are going to have to realize that actually they do need to be more person centered in how they approach to recruit people. And people, the point of life, as far as I'm aware, is to actually do your best to enjoy it and be nice to other people and help them enjoy it too.
Mm.
Like, so I think society's going to be pushed that way as the new generations come through and have different priorities, which actually align to that a lot better.
No, certainly, and I think that's. I mean, there's a few things actually. I think the younger generations do a lot better than we did, and that's one of them in terms of prioritizing things like your mental state. And I can remember like going to my first jobs and not always liking them, but you kind of have this attitude or kind of have this feeling of you just pull up with it, you just pull up with it, you just pull up with it,
Yeah.
and eventually you can't just keep putting up with it. And I've quit so many jobs over the years for these reasons, and yeah, it just makes sense to be like, look, if your company does this, does this, does this, does this, or whatever it may be, you already know from the jump that this ain't gonna be a place where you're gonna feel comfortable working in. You're right, yeah. Why bother still go through with it? You know,
Yeah, because
why waste your own time?
you can make money playing Mario 64 apparently. So
Right,
what?
exactly, exactly. You know what I mean? It's like I remember like when we in YouTube when people started making money off of it, and a lot of the pushback was, oh, it's just a phase, or you're not going to make that much money, you're still going to have to get a real job, and that kind of thing. And you look at it now, and people, well, maybe not everybody, certainly, but I think more and more people look at YouTube as a viable option of making a living, because it's proven that you can find something that you actually enjoy and make a decent living out of. You may not become a billionaire or whatever, but you can make enough, realistically make enough to just live a decent life.
I think the thing is, this is a very generational thing, and I think I don't know exactly how you are. I know how old you are. I know of a similar age. I'm towards the end of my 30s now.
Older that for me, but
I think that there is. I think that the generational problem with when YouTube came in is that up until that point, up until YouTube happened, and the internet started to create in its own money and its own, I say celebrities in the loosest of terms, because basically before that, if you were on telly, everyone knew who you were. You were famous, so you earned lots of money. The idea of there being this in between where you entertain a few hundred people or a few thousand people on a kind of niche basis like that, it didn't exist. You're either famous or you're not. You're either making money, and if you're making money from presenting something, you're famous. I mean, with the exception of things like local radio or whatever. But essentially, if you're an entertainer, you either make big bucks or you failed. And the internet has allowed you to sit in the middle somewhere. And there's all different spectrum as to whether you're still failing or not. That's generally down to how you approach what you're doing yourself, really. Right. But I think from our age upwards, I think it's rare that we, for people to really think of it in a different way. When I first came across streaming, right, when came across Twitch, I was like, what are they doing? Why are they doing that? I had exactly the same, because, well, I don't think I was so scathing of it as people were with YouTube, when they're like, oh, it's just young idiots doing stupid things and they won't make any money and it's just a fad. So, well, if young people are watching it, they're going to get older, right? So that means there's a market. It's just the market didn't exist before. So why aren't you need to acknowledge that rather than just discount it because you can't be bothered to spend the time to, it ages yourself. If you just go, oh, it's for young people, well, you're making it that way. You're aging yourself immediately by just going, no, you've got to at least explore it. Like TikTok, that's how a lot of people think about TikTok, or did. It started to grow a little bit now, a bit more with people of slightly older generations, I suppose. But when it came along, it's just young people making stupid videos or whatever. But you've got to actually look into it to figure out what it is, to figure out its worth. It's still your decision as to whether you actually take it as a form of entertainment that you enjoy yourself. You have your own opinion on that. But that whole discounting of it, oh, it's just new rubbish, doesn't get you anywhere. And I think that when it came to streaming and I saw these people, I immediately first thing I was watching people stream was DJing. So I was like, well, I don't see I've got no interest in watching someone else play a computer game. I'd rather play a computer game myself. That was my thought. So I was watching people DJ and like, well, actually, this is cool. This is fascinating. I'm seeing people maybe 10, maybe even 15 years older than me playing music into a camera in their bedroom. I'm like, that's mental. Why are they doing that? That's weird. So I was like, well, the only way I'm going to understand it is to kind of give it a go. And I think that is something that I know I'm blessed with, is that I will try new things. I might not like them, but I will give everything a try before I make my mind up about it. And the people that don't do that, well, they're the ones who end up missing out and becoming miserable old gits because they're not at least giving things a try.
Yeah, no, certainly. I think there's people out there that still exist now where it's like they would always going to look at the new thing and dismiss it as some kind of fad or some kind of nonsense. And reality is that thing that you don't understand, as you said before, like there's people coming up that are looking up to that. What we don't understand now is going to potentially has the potential to become the next big thing later. And if we're not trying to understand it, then yeah,
Yeah, the gap
we're
will only
just
get bigger.
yeah, and we
Yeah,
still won't. We'll still be because there's probably people now that look at YouTube and Twitch and all these things and still say things like, "Oh, it's just a fad, it's just silly." But then you hear about I don't know some 8-year-old YouTuber that makes like $10 million a year or something, and while you're like I don't know 55, worked your whole life, and your pension
yeah.
comes in at £2,000 a year or something. It's like, bruh, you know,
I think
it's
I
just
think
like I mean, the way one person's life works out is always going to be different to the way the next person's life works out. But when you're looking at somebody else and have nothing but bitterness, then yeah, I feel that says more about a person's own feelings of their own selves and their own inadequacies rather than what is actually going on. You know?
absolutely, and I think the key thing, one of the best things that's come out of it, and it is reflective in the fact that you can now, you know, charge people to teach them how to play Mario 64 quickly, is there is that that there is more than just BBC, ITV, and Channel 4 as forms of
Yeah,
entertainment. You can create an identity and a channel of your own, and it can be to exactly your own taste. And you might have some people like it, and if they do, they can support you, and they might even manage to line your pockets a little bit. And if not, as long as you're enjoying what you're doing and putting out there, you can just carry on doing it. There's no judgment. But I think people of our generation and upwards, they think, well, if you're not famous out of something like this, you've failed at it.
yeah,
Because previously, before that boom of the internet, it was pretty black and white as to where entertainment really was.
yeah.
You know,
You're
with the
somebody or you're
exception of the bloke
nobody,
who
and
runs the local
yeah,
open mic night, you know, that's kind of all there was. So now that there is and this is where the generational gap is. People where these articles are like, oh, they're so entitled because they don't want this job. They don't need it because they actually know that there are ways of making money through doing other things too. And
mm,
why do we have a 5 day week? Why is it 9 to 5? That's a bloody lot of time of our life to be spent doing something for the sake of someone else, generally for an unfair proportion of the profits.
yeah. Um, Okay, so speaking of that, I think this could be an interesting segue because it has a lot of what we just talked about has a lot of similar things to this the next bit, which is about the London poetry scene, where we met
Yeah,
on the London poetry scene. I was doing poetry, you was doing DJing, and I believe some poetry as well.
I was doing poetry
Yeah, you was doing poetry
for
as well.
maybe 2 months. I think I was kind of really pushing the poetry angle. I'd been writing poetry 4 years, but oh no, that's a lie. I did do the poetry cafe probably about a year before we met. So I was probably on and on. I wasn't doing it. I wasn't pushing
Mm.
myself, but I was occasionally doing some performances. Probably for in total about 18 months. But the time that we met was, I think, the time that I was pushing it a lot more. That was the kind of very short, like turbo mode for
Yeah.
for those couple of months.
What I think is interesting though is that I mean, I guess by now where neither of us are on the London poetry scene or too much. I mean, you're not even in London anymore, so there's that, right?
No.
Um, but I've from talking to you before, it seemed like some of the reasons why we're not on it so much are quite similar. And I'm someone who kind of fell into poetry somewhat accidentally. I wasn't necessarily looking to get into it. I just came across these poems online that I thought were amazing and was so kind of drawn to it that I ended up sort of writing my own stuff and going out. And then, from there, kind of I met some people and definitely had a good time on the poetry scene. I think I met a lot of cool people and a lot of interesting things happened. I think a lot of who I am right now certainly came out of being on there and just learning about myself and my own creativity. But towards the sort of end, and I say end because I guess these things don't really end, but certainly towards the times where I wasn't on it so much, there was this kind of feeling of, as much as I like this, it doesn't feel like this is where I'm supposed to be anymore. It doesn't feel like it's for me anymore. And I don't think it's to do with of course, there's gonna be new people coming up, and that's great. I actually still watch some of the poetry channels and some of the young guys coming up, and I think they're amazing. So I do feel like I still have a love for poetry, but just the London poetry scene itself just felt like this is not where I'm supposed to be, and a big part of that just came out of a lot of frustrations I felt. And granted, I'm having time to reflect on it. I know a lot of that is my own bullshit. But then some of it, I guess, was just the hypocrisy of people you meet. I remember one time when I recorded I'm gonna call it an album. I guess technically it's an EP or whatever, but I'm gonna call it an album because that's
It's just a short album. That's fine. That's what it is.
But yeah, I put that out, and I can remember going to some shows and doing some spoken word, and then people be coming up to me and be saying, "Oh, that was great, that was amazing," and all that sort of stuff. And I'm thinking, "Oh, cool, I've got a CD. Would you like to have a copy?" And I was like, "Oh, no, no, thanks." And it was like the hardest thing to sell. It was I think it was like £5 I sold it for. It wasn't expensive. Well, I mean, comparatively to other prices. I mean, of course, depending on the individuals, it's that. And I don't want to, and I guess as I'm saying this, I get it. I'm sounding like an entitled prick. I understand. You can't buy my CD for only £5. It's only five. I get it. I realize how it sounds. But it's more just that feeling of frustration of constantly being told that you're great, and then when you try to offer something, it's like, nah, I don't want it. You know what I mean?
You're giving them an opportunity to put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and they don't. I think it's I think scenes in themselves. I and we, when I'm speaking on behalf of my bandmate, struggled with scenes. We wanted to be on the London hip hop scene, and we spent a long time trying to do so. We were met with tumbleweed, essentially. So we didn't fit right in, and that was kind of one of the reasons. I mean, the fact that we were from such a nothing kind of town doing what we were doing in itself, we didn't fit in here. So we were like, right, but we knew that there aren't many people from Eastbourne who are trying to make it as rappers. They just aren't, and particularly trying to make it in London as rappers. So the fact that we were pushing that, we had a very different angle to other people. We didn't swear, we didn't do anything about streety life. It was all very poetic, I suppose, because I got into poetry having done hip hop for 4 years or so. Basically, the hip hop scene weren't interested in us, and we knew we were quite spoken wordy, so we were like, let's try the poetry scene. And Bernard James did a lot more and was far more successful with it than I was. He had a lot more patience, and he ended up doing a lot more great shows. He did quite a few with I can't remember the name of the poetry group, but Ed Sheeran used to go there, and Dan Sue was the guy who ran it. And
Apples and Snakes?
It wasn't. No, he did do Apples and Snakes. I can't remember what they were called. But anyway, he did. He got into. I'm sure he got into some kind of final or took part in some actual kind of competition with them. And at the point that he'd started to kind of find a bit of love, which we'd never got out of the hip hop scene, he was like, well, you should give it a go too. I had a book of poetry because I just finished my creative writing degree, in which I'd written a lot of poetry. And some of that I'd already gone to the London Poetry Cafe with some of my peers from uni to perform at. So that's basically what got me into the poetry scene. But to be honest, after a couple of months of it, I was a bit bored of going to events, hearing people just kind of talk in exactly the same dialect, using the same cadence. It wasn't varied enough for me. It was like the hip hop community that we couldn't fit in with either. That I was like, well, I want to be different to that. And it got to the London poetry scene, and I was like, and I want to be different to this too. And I think that's been my blessing and curse all the way through all of my creative endeavors. Is I want to be different. And in some cases, it's taken me till this age of my life to realize that sometimes different for the sake of being different isn't actually beneficial.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
it's fine to be different, but if your goal is just to be different, the quality of what you're doing is probably suffering somewhere, and you won't be able to see it. And I wasn't able to see it at the time throughout our endeavors as the band and my poetry output. I wasn't able to see it because I was like, it's different, so people should be like, this is cool, but it doesn't work like that. And it takes a mature brain, and some people have a mature brain at 20 and can figure that out. I didn't. It took me until I was nearly 40 to get my head around that, So yeah, and talking specifically about the London poetry scene, the other thing that I didn't like about it, which kind of some of the things that made me want to be different, was I did find it could be quite bitchy, like hearing some of the other poets talk about other poets, or particularly other promoters or poetry companies. There was a lot of kind of cat fighting, not physically, but just like snidiness in there. And at the end of the day, everyone was trying to achieve the same thing. And I found it quite draining and exhausting that there was that there. When I'd been tried to get involved in the hip hop scene in London and found the same thing, I'd hoped that poetry would be different. And it was actually a little bit worse. So that I knocked it on the head. I think the last poetry gig I did was at a cinema somewhere in East London with Bernard James, and we did, yes, I think it was, and we each did a set, one after the other, of completely freestyle poetry. So none of it was written. We just made it all up on the spot. And when we came away and we got a massive round of applause, I was like, well, that's the nail in the coffin then, because if I got a round of applause for that old rubbish, just because I was saying things in the way that they should be said for spoken word poetry, I was like, it's just not for me. So that was it for me. That was the end.
Yeah, and it definitely did kind of feel like that as well in terms of what gets people to say clap, cheer, and that sort of thing. And I guess there's a few reasons for that. People respond mostly to what they can relate to, and a lot of
or what they expect,
yeah,
and fitting into the mold.
Oh, right, what a lot of my later poems were very much. I wouldn't say they were completely unrelatable, but they probably were very. And to be honest, a lot of that was quite deliberate in terms of how I wrote it. I wasn't really trying to write about a particular thing. It was more just things in my head that I was trying to get out. So yeah, you might be able to. I'm sure people could relate to some of it or maybe bits of it, but overall, it was just like 8-10 minutes worth of just words. You know what I mean? And I guess it's cool to hear when somebody's doing it, but when it comes to listening to it back again, it's kind of like, oh, it's cool, but how many times do you want to hear that, right?
Yeah, and that's how I feel about some of the music that we put out, particularly from my I'm not casting any aspersions over Bernard James's input, but knowing my own, I listen to some verses and I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. That's just made to kind of sound good, or or that's so abstract and up its own arse that no one was ever going to understand that. Like, yes, there's obviously space for things to be abstract, but there's got to be a balance. And I didn't figure out how to strike that balance, and here we are.
Yeah.
You live and learn.
I think for me at the time, though, I didn't necessarily want to strike that balance. I was very much at the time like, I want to do it this way, and I guess a part of me was aware that, in fact, I remember a friend of mine once said to me that one of the reasons I might, and this is interesting because I'm not sure I actually told him that I wasn't getting many, because I had a few booked gigs before that, and that there was a point where I just wasn't getting that many coming through, And I don't think I told him this, but he came to me, and he was saying that one of the reasons why I might struggle to get gigs is that people don't know how to categorize it.
Mm.
And what
100%.
Yeah, and what he suggested that what I should do is like maybe find like a niche and stick to that, become known in that, and then branch out. And I remember thinking at the time that sounded like really good advice, but also thinking to myself, it's not advice I want to take because I like to do
I
different
want to do this
things,
scene well. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
like to, maybe talk about, I don't know, a video game, and then tomorrow talk about a movie, and then the next day talk about, I don't know, wrestling, and then talk about some, you know what I mean? I have different interests, and different things inspire me, and but I really appreciate what you said to me because it's one of those moments I think where it's kind of like a turning moment where you're kind of thinking that like, yeah, you're right, and it was that for me was kind of like I don't want to say the beginning of the end, but certainly a time where after that more and more it did make more and more sense to me as to why certain things are happening, and why more and more I felt like perhaps this isn't the place for me. You know.
Yeah. It, I completely echo those sentiments.
Mm,
Like, I look back on when we were trying to get gigs as a band, it's like we realized that the hip hop scene didn't class us as hip hop. And I think the other thing that was difficult was that our albums were generally not all. There's quite we viewed them as being quite somber and quite dark. They
mm,
weren't entirely, really, but there were big elements to that. But our live shows weren't. Like, we jumped around all over the place and put absolutely everything into it. And again, I think it just meant that people didn't know where to put us. If we sent them our EP or album to listen to, and they're like, no one wants to hear this live. So it was so hard to get live gigs. And we also were like, we quickly figured out that the hip hop community didn't value us. So we were like, we want to get gigs supporting like indie bands or just any other band.
mm.
Like, we want to be the weird guys that people don't expect as a support act that win them over by the end of the set. That's what we were actually best at doing. But getting those doors open was so hard because people were like, they only wanted to book what was safe, obviously,
Yeah.
because why would you put your neck on the line booking some crazy blokes shouting over a CD over another band that a bit like the main line, the headliner band, but just not as big yet. So it just didn't work out. It was a hard. We learned a lot of hard lessons in our 20s.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that we tried to learn those lessons, because there's plenty of people who took a job in the council at 18 and here they are at 40, and they're still doing it. I'm glad I've got all those memories and I've got those
Oh,
things, and
indeed.
I'm still being able to be creative. I haven't just closed the door on being creative altogether. It hasn't put me off it. It's just given me more things to learn to kind of take forward in whatever I do now.
Certainly. And I think for myself, like one of the biggest lessons I learned throughout everything is my main passion is being creative, and not necessarily being creative in a particular field,
Yeah.
but just being creative and finding ways to continue to be creative and making sure that, whatever job I might have or whatever else I might be doing, that I've always got time to be myself and put that out in some way, and personally I do believe that everybody has some kind of creative outlet, but we don't always nurture that. And then especially like, going back to what you said earlier about where, we kind of grew up in a generation where you're either famous or you're nothing, and I think a lot of people internalize that to some level where they think the thing that they enjoy doing, the thing that expresses themselves, maybe it doesn't make a lot of money, and so they just never bother try. And
Yeah.
to me, it shouldn't be about whether it makes money or not, or if it gets
No.
you famous or not, but just you being able to do something that is uniquely you. And even if that's for, a few hours a week or whatever, how much time a week you can manage to do that. But I feel that's important, that everybody to nurture that side of themselves and not just get a job, work, go home, go to sleep, eat your breakfast, go to work. You know what I mean? There's
I
more
completely
to life than
agree.
that.
And it is about the mindset of, or it, it's like it's like saying to people who play Sunday league football, "Oh, what's the point? Because you're never going to play for Man United." Well, they want to play football, and they
Yeah.
get, So it's just the same thing. It's just I don't want to play football. I want to talk bollocks into the internet.
Yeah. Exactly. This is my outlet.
Yeah, yeah. Whether anyone's listening or not, I'll still be there talking bollocks.
But if actually, that's what I just saw on Twitter today. Actually, DJ Vlad, he actually puts a DJ in the front of his name.
Yeah, well, more for him.
But
So
DJ Vlad, he put out a tweet today saying, and I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but he said it was something to the effect of playing video games consistently is a sign of depression. And he goes on to say that think of the 100 greatest moments in your life, none of them involve playing video games. And he puts another tweet saying it doesn't mean people who do it professionally, it doesn't mean people who maybe play 3 hours a week. He's talking about people who just play hours and hours a day. And I was looking at that like, yeah, I 100% disagree. I mean, there's lots of signs that a person could be depressed, that the person could be depressed, and yeah, video games could potentially be amongst those signs. But just the fact that somebody plays games, nah, I think we find things that we enjoy, and not everybody is out here trying to become the next CEO of some company. Some people like their life the way it is. They maybe they have a job or they go to school or whatever, but they come home and they do the things they enjoy. They spend time with the people they enjoy,
I
and
don't.
there's nothing wrong with that.
I don't need life advice from DJ Vlad. Actually, like and people don't need life advice from me. All I can do is reflect on what I've done and what I've learned, that how I perceive my own life lessons and what I go forward to do. I don't generally, particularly with things like Twitter and stuff, those one sentence statements that people put out, it's just bait for attention. It's complete nonsense. Like, it's not beneficial to anyone voicing a statement of opinion like that. Like, the world is too nuanced for anyone to just be like, well, this is bad. Apart from rape, I mean, that is pretty bad. There are some things that just are bad. But to be honest, if you put that in a tweet, I don't imagine that you're going to get a huge lot of attention, because everybody knows that. So I don't. People can do, as long as it's not hurting other people, do what makes you happy. And if playing video games makes you a little bit more happy than sitting watching the one show, I would suggest you fucking do it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, you think was we kind of grew up in that era of like people always trying to tell you what to do and what happiness is and what success is. Well, I say we grew up in that. I'm sure these things have been around long before our times as well. But we kind of come up in that. You're told, become a doctor or become a lawyer or whatever it is, and this is going to make you happy. Do this.
Your
do
job
that,
defines
this is going
you.
to make you happy. And the reality is that, I mean, as corny as it sounds, it's true. Happiness is something that it's not a destination. It's a journey. It's from within.
It's personal to you. Your own happiness.
You can't get money, yours, and that makes you happy. I mean, yeah, money can help with certain problems, sure, and it could help alleviate certain stresses. I'm not disagreeing with that fact, but it doesn't make you happy. No,
and I'm really wary about doing the things I love for money now, because your relationship with that thing has to change, because you have to see it as a necessity to keep to keep the lights on, to keep food in your fridge. Your love. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't love it as much, but it does generally mean you don't love it the same. And sometimes it does mean that you fall out of love with that thing. I think we might have discussed it when you were on the stream with Unadulterated with Phil, one that we run on my Twitch. Because
nice plug, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. We've chose a Googleable name that we never did for the band, so that's useful. But Phil used to did a lot of drawing, and ended up, because he loved doing it, and then was people were like, "Oh, can you draw this for me and draw that for me?" And next thing you know, it was like, "Oh, I could turn this into a little bit of business." Turned into a business. He was like, "I fucking hate this drawing." He's not drawing the stuff that makes him happy, so he stopped for about, I think it must have been about a year, maybe 18 months, and now he's kind of rebranded himself all over again. And he's drawing what he wants. So I don't know if he's even got a vision to selling any prints at all. I don't know what his plan is yet because we've not had a proper catch up since he started doing it. But yeah, your love for those things change. I won't. I mean, unless you pay me a lot of money, I'm not going to DJ a wedding or a private party. I don't do it. I don't DJ. Generally, the venues that I DJ in, they don't even pay me because I don't want someone having the kind of remote authority to tell me to change the music I play. Because if they're employing me, I'm at their behest. I'm DJing because I love DJing and I love the music that I play, and I want to share that with people. Because the other thing is that people are blind nowadays. The only music they access is on Spotify. They don't realize that there is loads and loads of other music being made that your Spotify algorithms will never find you. So the DJ is actually just as important now as it was 20 years ago, possibly even more, because everything's even more filtered because you're only finding things through Spotify. With the exception of people who use SoundCloud, to be honest, because that does have a good algorithm for finding stuff that anybody has made. But you know, this is curated by a human being who has feelings and can relate to music, and therefore, I don't want anything to be compromised in my creative output. So as such, I won't do gigs that essentially that I'm getting paid for. I might do the very odd one as a massive favor for someone, but it needs to be it's my art. You know, I realized that no one wanted, you know, when at the point that I realized that no one wanted to buy the music I made, I was like, well, I should just play the music that people are going to want to hear. And that has paid off, you know, to dividends, not financially, but for my well-being. I know whenever I do a gig, people are going to enjoy it because I find music that generally I know people are going to like because I love it and I see what the benefits of it are.
Yeah, and I think that's a big part of kind of any creative. It's like, you know, on one hand, you'd always want to get to a point where you can do the thing you want and make a whole bunch of money on it, and that's great. But then the problem is that often means that, like you said, your love for it changes, because if somebody's paying you to do something, then they have some say over how that's created.
Yeah, they have a little control, you know? Even if it's just a little.
Yeah,
you know, that changes your love for it.
And that kind of thing, it's like, it's not strictly speaking a bad thing in and of itself, but at some point, especially, you know, for example, you might get a request to say, okay, we're going to here's some money and we want you to DJ, but you could only play songs from, I don't know, the last 2 years. Okay, that's maybe not so bad, but then next time you're going to pay some money, but you can only play a song from this list or a song from that list or this particular song. And it gets to a point where your input becomes so minimal and it's not really you DJing anymore. You're just there playing a
I'm an employee at that point, and it's not an art that I'm exhibiting. Do you know what I mean?
It's not. I remember there was this. I used to do some photography for a little while, and I got to a point where I never, not like fully professionally, but you know, I guess I got to a point where I was thinking about taking it professionally and kind of going that route. And this one lady was asking about hiring me for I can't remember if it was like a fashion shoot. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, doesn't matter because I never did it. But yeah, she was talking about it, and she said, "Oh yeah, I wanted to talk to me about doing some photography." And all right, cool. What's the thing? And she went into this whole thing about, yeah, I'm gonna have to tell you, you know, what to shoot, how to shoot, how far to zoom into. I'm gonna have to tell you which angles. She was writing this in the thing. This is what I'm gonna have to tell you how to do. And I'm reading this thing like, so you just want me to hold the camera and press a button?
Yeah, I was gonna say you don't need a photographer. You just need a camera, love.
Yeah, like, and she was like, and I said to her, well, if you want me to do photography, then I can do photography, but I would need to be doing the photography. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mind if you want to make a few suggestions, or if there's anything specific that you want, cool, I could try and get that. But ultimately, it's like if you've seen my pictures and you like what I do, then let me do that. You
That's
know
what
what I
you're
mean?
hiring me for. Yeah.
Right. And yeah, so she never went for in the end. She kind of got pissed off that I questioned it. And so yeah, it never happened.
It's
But
that compromise for art.
yeah,
It's like Twitch streamers who are like, oh, would you, they'll ask on their Discord, I'll do, what should I stream next?
mm,
Looking for, if you're doing something creative, the vast majority, I mean, I understand why, people want to make slight improvements
mm,
to their streaming. And of course you do, if it's a minor thing that you can change in regards to, I mean, I actually have a feedback form set up on my Twitch so that, I mean, I've only had a couple of responses, but one of them was like, make the chat bigger. Brilliant. That's great. That's
yeah,
not compromising any of my creative output. That's that's the kind of thing that's there for. Because if you
yeah,
don't actually like the content, there are millions of other people streaming on
right.
Twitch. They'll probably make something that you'll enjoy more. So yeah, it's about that balance of, you do need to get feedback, but you don't want to compromise your art or whatever it is that you're doing as a creative outlet, because you're doing it. You should be doing it for you and hoping that other people are enjoying it, not doing it because it's you want it to be a sellable commodity.
Mm, indeed. I think when it comes to feedback, because I mean, whether you like it or not, you're going to get feedback when you do anything online, right? People just volunteer it. It's just what it is at times. And I thought one of the lessons I've learned over the years is to not take every piece of feedback that comes to you, because not every piece of feedback that comes to you is ultimately to benefit you, even though that might be their intention. Because people tell you things, and for the most part, they're not trying to be rude. They're just telling you what they think is a good idea. But then I think the next step for yourself is to kind of look at it and say, okay, is this a good idea for me? You
Yeah,
know?
not every idea is a good idea. It's just an idea. You've got to
Yeah.
figure that out yourself.
So things like I don't know, let's say I remember one video I put out years ago. It was a movie review of some kind, and some of the comments were things like the microphone is too low or something like that. I was like, okay, cool. Now I understand. I could maybe fix that. This is like early days, so I didn't really understand the technology as well. But okay, cool. I understand. It needs to be louder. It does get annoying when like 20, 30 people keep saying, yeah, I get it. Like the
Yeah,
microphone's low.
yeah.
Like you,
Can you
I got it
not
the first
read
time.
the
Thank
other
you.
comments? Yeah.
Or like a year later, and somebody comments on that old video that the microphone's low. I was like, bro, I get it. The microphone's low. Check my new
Turn
videos,
captions
please.
on, mate.
Yeah. But yeah, things like that you could kind of look at and say, okay, I understand. But then sometimes people might say things like, talk about that's my, let me think of a better example. They'll give you a piece of feedback that directly compromises what you want to do. Like, for example, I did some reaction videos, and people would say that was one of the complaints that some people would make is that I didn't look like I enjoyed it, and I was like, oh, it's a reaction video.
Yeah,
My reaction is that. you know,
yeah,
if I
yeah.
say I like something, then I liked it. If the way I like something isn't necessarily the way you like something, okay, but I liked it. So to tell me that I don't look like what?
That's
Like
an odd one.
what am I supposed to do? Like put some fake smile on my face and jump around and act like I've never heard a song before or something like you
That
know what I mean? Like
Yeah, that I mean, that if they're watching a reaction video, I mean, you're there to see what that reaction is, regardless.
mm,
You can't. You're not there. Well, am I going to watch it if he loves it?
yeah.
Like, what's the point? Because there's a 50% chance that. Yeah, I don't
Yeah, I
know.
mean, reaction videos can be fun to do, I find. But yeah, I've definitely found that with certain, especially if you're doing reactions like music videos, like certain bands seem to attract an audience of very, very hardcore fans that love to watch their reaction videos, which is great because you get views, but then it sucks because you just get a bunch of entitled people that
Yeah,
start telling you how you're supposed to respond to something. And you're like, bruh, this is not why
Yeah,
I'm
well,
here. Like,
if you've got bands where they've got those fan bases and there's elements in the lyrics that refer to different things and so on. The thing, I've never done a reaction video, but I have to say I wish I'd done one for the video for the latest song by the 1975 because it's a wicked video. So I just wanted to just say it because I thought about it last week. I wish I had just done one because I wasn't expecting it to love it as much as I did, but it's amazing. So yeah, anyone who didn't expect a reaction video, you've just got a little micro one from me there, and I absolutely loved it.
Well, let's talk a little bit about freestyling because you did mention that earlier, and I do want to talk to you about freestyling. And was that something that you've always done as part of your DJing, or is that something that came later on, or how did
No,
that come
so
about?
I started DJing, or I had DJ decks from the age of about 17. I didn't really know what to do with them for many, many years. I didn't really start DJing until after the band had started. So we started the band when I was in my early 20s. And we were a rap band, like a very alternative electronic rap band. And we knew of freestyling as an entity, an element of hip hop, and we thought that if we were rappers, we should do it. So we just spent hours, days practicing freestyle rapping. And at this point we hadn't met any other rappers. We were making a little EP in Bernard James's dad's basement studio. These were the first pieces of music that we were ever working together on and making. And in our downtime, we kind of learnt to freestyle and then when we met actual rappers, but we met other people who did rap in the local area. None of them did it. We just thought we just thought it was part and parcel of being a rapper. You freestyled and that was something that you were able to do. So we were quite surprised when we found that we were pretty much the only rappers in. There weren't a huge amount of rappers in and around Eastbourne, but we were the only ones that were really freestyling at any point. And one of the rappers that we looked up to, who sadly has passed away since, but a rapper called Slugger T. We remember distinctly at one point at a pub having a drink with him and him saying that we were the best freestylers in Eastbourne, and we were like, "Oh my god, this is the best!" That was such a big moment for us to be. He was 2 or 3 years older than us and kind of been on the scene a bit longer. So from that point on, we kind of just realised that we were able to do it, and that's kind of where it's been ever since. Like sometimes I'll do it relatively well and I'll do stuff where I'm like, oh, that's quite good. Other times I'll do it and I'm like, that was absolute rubbish, but I do enjoy it. So therefore when I started streaming, and I suppose in a throwback to what I was talking about earlier, I was like, I want to be different. I saw what all the other DJs were doing on Twitch with their channel reward points, and I thought, channel reward points, what a wicked idea. That's such a clever little mechanic in Twitch. I was like, I'll put something in there, and then if people earn enough points or send me a couple of quid, I'll do a freestyle rap for them. And that was that, really. And I've done some streams where it was just freestyle rapping, but Christ, they're hard. And actually, there are really well accomplished professional rappers who do freestyle rap streams, and they're so boring, and they're bored. They're just there going, oh yeah, watching the chat, just seeing all the words come up. Oh yeah, I can see you wearing a hat. I hope you don't come and kidnap my cat. But let me backtrack. I can see you in your knapsack. It's just, it just goes on and on and on. And I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So I just need it to be as an extra thing within my DJing. And then it just kind of bled through that as a channel reward point, I don't turn it off. So it's also on in my just chatting streams, not the ones with Phil, because we have to use a different platform for that. But my gaming streams, it's on as well as a channel reward point. So at any point, and it's kind of I think the reward point says I'll kind of do it for as long as I can, basically, which might mean you might get a couple of sentences out of me and then I just fall asleep. But yeah, it's just something that I love, and it's not something that I consider myself to actually be good at. I think everyone can do it, but people are absolutely petrified to try. And I know that I have tried enough to be confident to just give it a go when I want to.
So here's how I think about freestyling, and you could let me know if this is close, accurate, or just completely off, way off. But anytime that I've, tried freestyling, just you have try to have some fun. Oh, somebody says freestyle. Okay, I'll try some rhymes. Da da da. And I can maybe think of a couple of words, and if I'm lucky, I might even get a rhyme or two. And then after that, what I find is that it's not so much that I can't think of things to say. It's more I'm either second guessing myself as to do I actually say it, or should I think of something else, or all these things kind of coming through. And so the way I think of freestyling is having the ability, or just getting to that point where you kind of have to let go of how things sound, what people might think of it, kind of let go of all those sort of inhibitions and just literally let things out and not worry about, are they going to get it? Is it going to be funny? Is it even going to rhyme sometimes? You just kind of just go.
Oh, 100%. Hardly any of it rhymes. It's all. And the other thing that I don't. There's an element that Bernard James and I refer to as safety lines. So I won't tell you what safety lines.
Oh, safety lines. Okay.
So I won't tell you what mine are because I know I have them. Most freestyle rappers have them. I don't know if you've heard of Stig of the Dump, or Big Stig as he's known. But we were really obsessed with his freestyle battles. So back when we were in our early 20s, we used to watch them on Jump Off. And
I remember Jump Off. Yeah.
He would do his freestyle. His battles were actual freestyles. And as in years to come, everything became pre-written. But his were freestyles, and it didn't take long before we noticed his safety lines. And once you figure out freestyle rappers' safety lines, you don't stop hearing them, and you don't hear any of the raps anymore. You just hear so safety lines are just little phrases that don't rhyme, that people use to kind of connect to the next thing they're thinking of. And I'll tell you Big Stig's one, because I don't want to tell you mine, because I don't want to ruin my freestyle for anyone who tunes in. But basically every couple of bars, he'd go, "Oh my fucking God, you look like an idiot. The way that I've seen you there, I'm going to bury you. Oh my fucking God." It was just, when you realize that but if you don't know that's happening, you're just focusing on all the rhymes, and you're just focusing, this is sick, this is amazing. And so that's I've given a big freestyler tell away, or at least our perception of freestyle, because we don't know many other people who do it.
I guess you've got more than one safety line though, right?
Yeah, but generally people have like maybe 2 or 3, but it's usually the same one.
I don't think I've heard the term safety line before, but now that you've described that, when I've heard freestyle rappers, I can think of a few where there's like certain phrases that come up, and it might be just like little, sometimes not even a phrase, sometimes I guess it's just like a sound that it might make.
Or sometimes it's just one word, or
right.
But I don't know if that's the official term, or if there is an official term, but I know that that's something that enables me to do it. I know I have some. I know Bernard James has some as well. That being said, the interesting thing about what you were saying earlier about kind of letting yourself go and letting yourself and not second guessing what you're saying, there is, and this sounds ridiculous, but there is a mental state that you can get into. It doesn't happen. You can't choose when it happens, where it is. We call it the infinite freestyle, and there's a point where you can just make anything rhyme with anything. You don't think about it. The words might not necessarily make sense in a wider context, but each of the phrases will. And it's happened to both of us on varying occasions. I don't know what it is that triggers it, but there is like this Zen-like state that you can get into, where suddenly you just feel like you could go on forever, and everything you're saying is amazing. It hasn't happened to me in probably 7 or 8 years, but it does happen. But the key thing is about freestyling, the best way to it's muscle memory. It's about doing it and practicing it a lot. Like, I'm not anywhere near as good now as I used to be when Martin and I would practice a lot, or when I used to drive a lot for work. I would freestyle in the car to keep myself awake and give myself something to do. It's so muscle memory based. So every now and again, I'll fall into a good one while I'm doing a DJ stream, but more often than not, I do it because it's a fun thing to do, and I'll try and say something funny, and I try and use some of the words in the chat. But it's it's a very interesting kind of entity, and I wouldn't go as to say that I'm particularly good at it. I just know that I'm able to do it to some extent, so I just enjoy doing it when anyone triggers it on Twitch.
So you mentioned just battle rap a moment ago, and I mean, just this last week, I think, but yeah, recently one of my favorite battle rappers passed away. Do you know Pat Stay?
No, I don't think I do. No.
He's a Canadian battle rapper from Nova Scotia. Battled a lot on the King of the Dots.
I've seen some King of the Dots. Back in the day, I would imagine I've probably seen some.
Yeah.
Oh, that's bad news.
I don't think he did a lot of freestyling to be fair, but yeah, as you said, a lot of battle rapping moved more into the writtens. But yeah, it's a sad story. Quick shout out to Pat Stay, one of my favorite battle rappers. Just loved what he was doing on the scene. You know, he was one of few battle rappers, at least that I know of, that were able to kind of go from being serious to telling jokes just really kind of seamlessly.
Yeah.
And he was only like 36.
So
yeah, he's a young dude and real talented. Had a son as well, and it was like, man, just such a sad story. But yeah, I guess I haven't watched a lot of battle rap recently, but there was a period of time I was watching loads of battle rap. So yeah, Jump Off from way back in the day.
yeah.
Jump Off, I think, are still around, but I guess they're not doing as much, I think. But
There was, what was the other one that took over after Jump Off?
Don't Flop.
Don't Flop. Yeah. Which was really written focused. They did at some point, and I think they still do now, do some battles on beat, which I always have preferred. I've done one like battle rap event, but it was part of a improv hip hop night, and it was a compliments rap battle.
Oh yeah,
and it was a tag team compliments battle rap that me and Bernard James won. So technically, I can say I took part in one battle rap and I won it. The fact is that it was kind of a twisted version of one.
Yeah,
but
compliments battles are fun to watch. They're really good. I like those. I mean, the regular battle raps are cool, but the compliments ones are funny because especially when they'll still do it in a way like they're going to insult the person, but then they'll say something like really nice and positive. It's just like it's the coolest. I like those. I like those a lot. So with Bernard James, Adventures of ...
Yeah, Google it.
Yeah. That was under the label Preciptoman.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think you had a few acts under that label as well. Is Preciptoman still running? Because I was trying to find out.
It's kind of dormant. It's not over per se. I mean, whether anything ever will be released on Preciptoman as a record label again, I'm not sure. I love making rap songs every now and again, but I can't commit to a whole album. I find it so draining. I found since I got into my 30s, I find it really hard to write lyrics for a track. I don't know what to write about. I think part of it was that through my 20s, and I'm not saying we didn't have fun through my 20s, but I wasn't actually very happy, which explains why a lot of the songs are sad and why I did poetry as well. Like, trying to understand my place in the world. And I'm very fortunate that within my 30s, I've got to a point where actually I'm quite content with my life. And therefore, the only thing I really knew about writing about was sad stuff. I didn't want to just make up sad stuff to write about and be fake. And I've just always, since that time, I found it really hard to write tracks. I've done the odd one. I did a song called Hip Hop Gripes 2 years ago. And I did the video on Zoom. And that was like, it was just a song about kind of taking the piss out of young rappers and the problem that older rappers have with them, and then older rappers and what young people have a problem with them for. And it was a comedy song essentially, but inspiration just occasionally strikes. I do a Christmas song every year, but Preciptoman, because it was originally a label. I've never gone through the efforts of trying to kind of if I've put out a song like that, I put it on YouTube. I might put it on Spotify. The need for a label is reduced now because Adventures of as a band we have talked. We do want to do another project together. When it will happen or if it will happen, we don't know. That would be when we used Preciptoman to kind of push it because people associate Adventures of with it. But we don't. Neither of us have a need for a record label anymore. What I have a need for though is at least to have some kind of merch that people can purchase to support my streaming. And therefore, I've actually just adopted Preciptoman as a sub-brand, so that, because I don't want people walking around with a KoopaNut t-shirt. Like, it seems too self-indulgent. So it's a way, so the t-shirts and the hats and things like that are available for people to kind of purchase as a kind of show of support without it being in a really gross way of like, I love KoopaNut, he's a great DJ and freestyler written all over a t-shirt. It's gross, you know? This doesn't work for me. So it exists basically as that at the moment. I think we did have one of our other artists, Solo Cypher, put out an album on it about 2 years ago. That was the last time it was properly active, I suppose, as a record label. But it can be whatever. It's always been whatever we needed it to be. When we ran creative writing workshops, it was our workshop company. When we ran Paper Cuts Radio, it was kind of the home for that. It was the idea of it was built out of it being a label, but really it's just a brand that we can shape and use for whatever our needs are, and that's kind of where it sits now. Okay. Don't go to the website because it doesn't exist. So I think
I get that.
But yeah, it just means we're really proud of what it did. I still have the Preciptoman banner up in all of my streams because I haven't got another banner yet. But you know, it still exists. It's almost like a little retro brand in a way. Yeah, that's kind of in the realm it exists at the moment. Who knows what will happen in the future? We can mold it into whatever we might need it to be next, I suppose. The reason why it mainly exists is because when we came up with our band name, we didn't think about the fact that nobody can Google that. You can never find any of our music unless you know either of our individual names or the name of the song you're looking for. You cannot find our music through searching, because we've got such a stupid band name. So we're like, well, we need to come up with an identity that's Googleable. So we came up with that because it doesn't mean anything and there's no other word that exists that it could be mistaken for.
Yeah, and I did try searching Adventures of, and you get a load of different results, and it's like, bruh.
You get the Adventures of Alice in Wonderland. You'll just get anything that starts with that sentence.
And apparently there's a lot of musicians using Adventures of as well. So it's like, this is not the one I'm looking for. This is not the one I'm looking for. Where is it? Interesting you said about, as an artist, but sort of not leading a label. Do you feel that's something that artists in general, or say artists coming up, because I guess with things like, Bandcamp and what's the other one you mentioned a while ago as well?
SoundCloud,
yeah. With things like that, like the need of a record label, I guess, is not. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think it's still a use for a record label, but I guess the need for a record label maybe isn't as much as it was, 20, 30 years ago.
I think it depends on the music you do. Like I say, Preciptoman started off as a record label, but towards the end of its last iteration, before it is the kind of in the ether state that it is now, it was more of a collective. So we had 4 artists. We gigged together. We would do Preciptoman gigs. So we would book a whole venue, and each of us would perform either in individual sets, or we'd mix it all up. In a way, it was a bit like the Wu-Tang Clan, I suppose, in that we had different artists that we were promoting all under that banner. And I think there is still value for artists nowadays in having that community approach, because if you've got 4 people promoting one thing that ultimately supports 4 people, that's better than one person promoting one thing that only promotes himself. So I think the collective idea is useful. It's like the DJ communities on Twitch, the Global Funk Fam, of which I'm a member at the moment. All these kind of Discord channels that support where streamers support other streamers. That can be true of musicians too. And I think that's something that we figured out way, way, way too late. We didn't make enough inroads at the beginning well enough to and then when we did try, like I said, we tried to kind of get in on the hip hop community in London, and it failed for all sorts of reasons. But I think there is value in that kind of collective approach to people trying to get stuff out there, because but labels in themselves, I don't know. I don't know how. I mean, I couldn't say, because I haven't been so very successful with music, so I don't know. I don't value my own opinion on it. Do you know?
Yeah. No, I get. No, I get. I think. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I guess what an artist's goal is going to determine which avenues they take and whether it's better for them to be with a label.
I think all of them need to be considered, though, and that label approach and that community approach. Like I say, if you've got 3 bands that are kind of similar or have got some similar characteristics, gig together, promote each other's albums on your own Instagrams and all that kind of stuff. See how far that group mentality will get you, because the chances are it will be further than doing it on your own. That being said, group mentalities are tricky, and that was one of the reasons that Preciptoman fell in that guise at that time, was that we had 4 of us all kind of with our own projects, our own agendas, as well as some joint up ones, and we all had our own personal lives. And it got to points where one person would be like, right, we want to put your album out, and that one is like not in the headspace to make an album at that point. So then there's a bit of animosity between those 2 members. And then 6 months down the line, when that person accused is kind of decided, well, that person's lazy, they're not doing anything, they then focus on something else. This person then like, I want to do an album now. And then that person's like, well, I've been trying to do that for the last 6 months, but it's hard because everyone's got lives, and when you're still working to keep the lights on and to actually still have some enjoyment out of your life, it proved very difficult, and as a result, it kind of petered out.
All right. So before we finish today, we started off talking about retro games. So I feel like this is a good place to kind of wind down a bit. Retro music format. So let's talk a little bit about your vinyl collection. We talked about a little bit about it on your podcast. So like, how did I guess being a DJ is how you got into vinyl collection, but was that for you, like, was you always, did vinyl come first then DJing, or did DJ come first and then vinyl?
Well, actually, they're not, for me, they're not actually related, really. Like, I got record decks when I was 17. I really didn't know what to do with them. I didn't know why there were two of them because all I wanted to do was make scratchy sounds like DJ Lethal and Biscuit. That was
Yeah.
what I
Little
wanted to
bits.
do.
Yeah.
So I bought a load of scratch vinyl, and I've still got some of it now. And I bought like promo. I went on eBay and I bought like just random beats and stuff. I didn't know what I was doing, and it's pre-YouTube. So because now, if you want to get into DJing, you'll know what to do in a week. You won't be good in a week, but you'll
Yeah.
know what to do in a week, easy. I had DJ gear for 4 years and didn't know what to do. So my vinyl collection is completely separate to my DJing, really. But I had those few records that I would just mess about with and make terrible noise with. But my vinyl collection came a bit later on when when the digital kind of revolution really kicked off. I was just like, I wanted, being a musician in my own right at the time, I wanted a way of of kind of showcasing the things that I like. As we've discussed before, nowadays where everyone's got Netflix, everyone's got Amazon Video, everyone's got Spotify. You don't have anything in your house to kind of give a representation of your taste anymore. You don't need it anyway. And I kind of, in a way of being able to support the artists better than just streaming their music or downloading it at the time, back when we're talking like LimeWire times.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted someone to show off, basically. It wouldn't be a surprise to anyone who's listened for this long. I'm a bit of a show off in a way. Like, if I'm proud of something, I want to be able to kind of showcase it in one way or another. And I think that's where my love for vinyl has come from. It's being able to have something physical that, if anyone pops around. There's nothing better than when you kind of went to a mate's house for the first time, in your 20s or whatever, go around for a few beers or whatever, and you'd look through their CD collection and look through their DVD collection, be like, oh, I've got that, or that's a load of shit, mate. What have you got that for? It's a conversational point, and it's a reflection of you as a person, and I really like that. And as a result, being able to support the artist better and to be able to kind of demonstrate that and index my own love and knowledge of music, my vinyl collection has kind of come from there, really. It's not huge. I'm quite selective about what I buy. It's got to be albums that I absolutely love, that I want to kind of define me. And that's where I can. And then occasionally I'll buy like a really expensive deluxe edition, and then 6 months down the line think, I don't know why I bought that.
Yeah, and I think similar kind of feelings towards it, especially when it comes to like the idea of having something that not only represents you in some way, but it's like a piece of art,
Yeah.
And I'm not able to do it in this abode, but one day, God willing, when I get my own kind of place, one of the things I'd like to be able to do is like have them, or not all of them, but have some of them kind of framed and put up, because
Yeah.
they are, in my opinion, art pieces. Like, it's not just I mean, with CDs, I guess I get it. It's the same picture with the cassettes but with vinyl, it's this large 12-inch. It feels to me more like what an album represents, and I get that doesn't really make a lot of sense logically, because an album is effectively just a collection of songs. But I feel like there's something about vinyl record, having the cover in such this large print, turning it around, that you've got like the song list on the back, slipping out the vinyl disc, and the inlay, and sometimes they had like the song words on a inside, on an inlay card. It feels like an experience more. You know what I mean? Like, not just. I mean, look, the stream is great. I stream most of my music these days because it's so convenient.
So do
And
I.
although I know it's not a great way to support artists, but they do get, I don't know, half a penny or something like that. but just maybe less than
But the
that though.
convenience is there. You can't, you can't deny the future. It's just, it's
Yeah.
sad for the artist that it does explain why gig tickets are so expensive. But yeah, you can't beat yourself up for that if it's there and it's a legitimate way of
It's
listening to
right. Yeah,
music. Why wouldn't you? It's so convenient.
exactly. And it's so that's how I listen to my music. But like you said about before about supporting artists, I find a lot, maybe not a lot, but certainly a decent majority of the vinyl that I buy tends to be things like um either unsigned artists that have put
Yeah,
out a special edition vinyl, or maybe artists that are not they're signed but maybe not as big, and they put out a special well, it's usually special edition vinyls these days, to be honest.
yeah.
Yeah, they're not in wide print that usually. So it's usually stuff like that, or yeah, like you're saying about albums that you really love, albums that mean something to you. I haven't done a charity. I know you talked about doing it. I think it was you or was it Phil? I can't remember. Sorry, but maybe we talked about doing the charity, going to charity shops. I haven't done that.
No, I don't really do. I don't do digging in the traditional sense, and that again is kind of fundamental difference between my vinyl collecting and most DJs vinyl collecting. Like I DJ solely with digital stuff because it's just so much easier and more convenient and cheaper than buying and having to cart around shit tons of vinyl.
Yeah,
But yeah, I don't do the kind of charity shop stuff. I do have a lot of vinyl that I did at one point when I was producing music. I would sample stuff and I'd just buy random stuff every now and again. And I've got hundreds of vinyl that I don't know what to do with now as a result of that, because I don't have enough time to produce my own music anymore. But no, I think, as you say, we collect vinyl for a very similar kind of reasons.
yeah. But yeah, I do
And I
feel
think
like.
just to
Oh,
recap on
sorry.
what you said about the difference between CDs and there not being a fundamental difference between vinyl and CDs. I think actually there is. Albums as an entity wouldn't exist if vinyl had never existed.
Yeah,
The reason why that all albums are kind of the length that they are typically is a legacy from
yeah,
that. So I do think there is a kind of purist element to collecting vinyl over CDs that is a valid point. I collect CDs as well because there are some albums that are out on vinyl that aren't out on vinyl that I want a physical copy of for exactly the same reason. So I do have a CD collection. It's not huge, but yeah, I think that is a valid point that vinyl is a more purist way of collecting
yeah,
albums over CDs.
yeah. I mean, see, yeah. I mean, I've probably got. I mean, right now, I say I've probably got more CDs than vinyls, and mainly that's because, well, I mean, vinyls is relatively new to me, and you just kind of grow up through like sort of the '90s and 2000s, where CDs was the dominant form of. Cassettes were. Well, cassettes still around, but they're kind of on their decline at that sort of point.
Yeah,
So just from that, I got more CDs, and so um yeah, I definitely have more of a nostalgia thing when it comes to CDs, but I think just when it comes to vinyls, and even though they've been around longer, it's still, and I had vinyl. Well, my dad had vinyls when I was a kid, and I've always kind of saw it as that old people's thing. So it's still kind of new to me in that sense. You know what I mean? Like it's something
yeah,
that I again came across by accident. I wasn't planning on starting a vinyl collection, just happenstances of various events that kind of led to it. And so I guess it's kind of a combination of knowing that they've been around as such a long time, but also that new toy feeling as well of something that I haven't really given much time to before, and just appreciating, holding something and that you can kind of look at and flip around and, and
it's like a little medal. It's like a
right,
medal, like of like, this is the music that I love, like, and I think I love it for that. I completely agree. It's I mean, and I had a big issue about opening vinyl. I had a lot of vinyl that's still in its shrink wrap up until
yeah,
I still got a lot in its shrink
yeah,
wrap because I'm worried about messing it up. I had the Kanye West, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy vinyl. I've had that for a number of years, and despite my absolute best efforts to treat it like it's the crown jewels, it looks like shit. Like it's all worn on corners, and
Mm,
because and that has made me so overprotective over vinyl. So recently, I've invested in a bunch of polyurethane sleeves for all my vinyl, and it's allowed me to actually start opening them and using them, because it's a bit kind of, it's a bit wanky to collect vinyl and just not open it. Um, I want it to have, I want it to have a personality. Do you know what I
mm,
mean? Um, and so yeah, as a result, that was a good segue into making me actually listen to a lot of my records. That I've got a few still in cellophane, but generally now, if I get a vinyl, I'll get it out, look at it, stick it on the player, and set aside that time to enjoy that album,
yeah.
which I won't do on Spotify. You know, on Spotify, I will enjoy it if I'm walking to town and I've got my headphones on, or I'll enjoy it as I'm driving around. But you're always doing something else. Whereas I find with vinyl here, particularly in the summer, I'll put a vinyl on. I've got like marine grade speakers that are set up to my record player that are outside, so I can sit in the garden in the sun and just listen to an album with
Yeah.
no distractions, and it's my favorite thing to do.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
so so yeah,
It's hard to
that's
do that these days, isn't it? Where just when I was a kid, like it was pretty much everything you got, you could just like play from beginning to end and not even think about it. You get to
yeah,
the end of it, you rewind the tape or whatever and play it again. But to find the time, yeah, that's it's a treat. But when you can do it, it is cool. Where you can just kind of sit there and just listen, do nothing, not listen to music while working out or listen to music while
yeah.
whatever, just nothing but let the music do what it
It's
does, you know.
beautiful, and it's hard to find time to do it. But I find vinyl makes me make time to
Mm.
do it in a way that CDs do to a certain degree, but streaming doesn't.
Yeah. Well, in its convenience, it means yeah, you're out in your car, you're out in this, you know, you whatever. But yeah, vinyl is like you have to, you set it up, you put it on, you put the needle down, and yeah, we'll let the needle drop
Yeah,
just gently.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, I think that's a good place to start wrapping up. Then, big up for coming through. I really appreciate you doing this. Um, but before we do end, is there any last words you'd like to depart on the audience and the listeners and or watchers?
I'd firstly like to say I hope I don't come across as like so up myself, and I promise that my streams, like I do not take myself seriously at all. So, but it's been no. Other than that, it's just been really nice just to catch up with you and chat through, some of our history, some of our shared history as well,
Mm.
and yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. Coming on, but that sounded a bit more dated than I intended. But thanks for coming, and that's even worse. Never mind. Thanks for being there.
No
thanks,
worries.
thanks for, thanks for being there. Or thanks for coming. I don't know. Maybe you came too. I don't know. I guess I can't see below that area, so maybe you did that too. But yeah, and I appreciate you taking the time out to chat with me. And yeah, talks about all kinds of cool stuff, and yeah,
Well,
big
keep it
up to
up,
you.
man. I love listening to your podcast. We'll get you back on one of the unadulterated before the end of the year, because it was great fun having you on. So
Thank you.
we'll do that again. And because I know that you've got an interest in wrestling, we've got a friend of we've got a friend of the stream show, so to speak, who is an amateur wrestler based up in
Okay.
Derby. He's come on twice. He's a regular guest in. So I wonder whether we should get you both in at the same time. It'd be quite
Oh,
fun.
definitely. I mean, I
Um,
would say I haven't watched a lot of wrestling lately. But yeah, I do try to keep up with like some of the news, and I do still, check their Twitter posts and things
well,
like
he's
that.
he's
So
really good
yeah.
because he he'll break kayfabe for us, and we get to hear like loads of like what actually goes on. It's
Oh, awesome.
fascinating because I'm not a mass. I don't follow wrestling. I used to, obviously. We all used to love it.
Yeah.
I don't follow it anymore, but I know that you have a shared interest in it as well. So I wonder whether we should get you both on the same one or something. We'll
Yeah.
have a
No,
think, but
definitely
we'll
up for
definitely
that.
get you back on because
Yeah, definitely up for
it's
that.
always wicked to have a chat with you, mate.
Cool. Oh, dude, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking, was it about an hour 40 out of your day to talk to me.
No worries.
Um, appreciate everybody who watch and or listen. Thank you for that. Drop any suggestions and things in the comments. I know we talked about the feedback earlier, but suggestions are still quite nice of who
Yeah,
you want to see
as long as they're
interviewed
nice
and
suggestions, and
yeah,
like you're not just saying, oh, you
exactly. Not
should
the
just become an
arsehole
airline pilot
comments,
or
but
something. This,
those any bullshitty things I'll ignore. But
yeah,
suggestions of maybe who you want to see interviewed and stuff like that, and or if I don't know, maybe the microphone was too low as well, so that too. But yeah, that's gonna be all for now. So guys, until whenever, if ever, peace.
cheerio.